The root word of decentralized, right, is centralized. So thinking about what is centralized finance, that's when you have the Federal Reserve System, right, printing the money, and then of course they act as an intermediary when we're talking about our monetary system, right? A decentralized system is when we don't necessarily have to have an intermediary. And so it's more of a pro peer to peer atmosphere as opposed to using an intermediary, right? A trusted party. Now we can move without a trusted party because we have the blockchain. And the blockchain is a system that shows transactions. It's essentially a ledger, very similar to accounting, right? That shows inputs and outputs. So if I move 5 coins from here, it'll show that it went to this wallet, 5 coins here, right? There's a level of transparency, but there's also a level of anonymity because it doesn't have your name, right, associated with the transaction, but it'll have your wallet number associated with the transaction. And so taking it a step back even further, we think about why is a peer-to-peer environment more important, or rather an innovation based upon, right, based upon the centralized environment. So over the past few years, as Vince just mentioned, I'll say in the past 3 to 5 years, the decentralized finance market, right, has influenced the centralized finance market. So, for example, years ago, right, before DeFi, decentralized finance, right, short for DeFi, came into play, you had to essentially buy a full share of whatever company on the stock market you were looking to buy, right? So if, for example, an Amazon share is what these days it's above $500 or something like that per share, then you would have to buy whatever that is, right? And so many people don't have $600 to purchase one share of a company, right? Because the idea is that you want to diversify. Well, DeFi came into play, and now you're able to buy fractions of a coin. You don't necessarily have to buy a whole Bitcoin, or you don't have to buy a whole Ethereum coin or token, or rather, you are able to purchase just a fraction of it. And so that was one of the innovations that decentralized finance brought into the game. Another innovation that decentralized finance brought into the game was the fact that the crypto market is trading 24/7, right? You don't have to, it doesn't cut off. You can make transactions whenever. It doesn't have to wait until Monday when the bank opens back up, or it's a federal holiday, so we can't make transactions right now. No, the decentralized finance market, again, a peer to peer, directly between each other interacting market, we can do this any time of the day and night, right? Now, why is blockchain important? Even beyond cryptocurrency, right? The blockchain technology that crypto is built upon has many different applications that we'll see as we move into the future. For example, one of the right, you have your wallet, right, and that's is you think about it as a digital wallet, and you're able to store information, and you're able to store your coins, right, your digital coins in your wallet. You're able to put your pictures in your wallet just as you would, right, your actual physical wallet. You will be able to do the same things with the digital wallet. Why is that important? Well, let's take the medical industry for example. If a person has many medical complications and they move from, let's say, New Hampshire to California, it's extremely difficult for people to take their medical records and transfer them to their new doctor, right? Because of the old systems of people writing things down. It's not as efficient in putting things in the system. We all know that states, right? Illinois communicating with Ohio is sometimes cumbersome. Imagine what it would be like with the small doctor's office in a whole different state with whole different rules, that now this other state and this other doctor's office need this information. Well, if we were using blockchain technology and all of your records, medical records, were put inside of your digital wallet, no matter wherever you went, right, you would be able to take that information with you inside of your digital wallet, right? So that is one of the innovations that we'll probably see with medicine. We'll also probably see that when it comes to our licenses and things of that nature, right? Where we don't necessarily have to physically carry our license around in our wallet anymore. We can, of course, pull out our digital wallet and show that I am who I am and verify, right? And so that goes back into NFTs and non-fungible tokens, right? And bringing that whole situation into play. So decentralized finance ultimately is a pro peer-to-peer environment, right? Built upon blockchain technology, which creates transparency, and it does it. We don't need a third party in between us, right? And so that's where the like I say, even beyond cryptocurrency, which is going to take some time, as you just mentioned. Not only are people invested in the American dollar, because we still look at cryptocurrencies and we'll say how much is it worth, and we still do that worth and that value in American dollars, right? So even beyond that, there's a generation of people who don't even want to use Cash App, even if it is American dollars, right? They still don't even just want to use financial technology in general because they're not used to it. So as the generations go, and then of course, as you just mentioned, with decentralized finance, and right, what this actually means for centralized finance, because now we're talking about the Federal Reserve. So when you bring the Federal Reserve into play and you're attempting to disrupt what the Federal Reserve has been doing for the past several hundred years, that's what we saw in the past, where people are seizing Bitcoin and seizing different currencies and saying, hey, what is this, right? And of course, Congress is now saying that Bitcoin, I want to say, it isn't an asset, or they're treating it more like a commodity versus a security. And that was one of the major debates going on in Congress, right? What exactly is it? So, from a very high level, everything is extremely new. However, because they're disrupting this space that's been around for for many, many years, the big players are now moving into the space. So you see the Black Rocks, you see the JP Morgans, you see the Fidelities creating products that provide access to cryptocurrency, whether that be directly or whether it be through an index. Now, the important thing is, right, as we just talked about wallets, owning your keys is important, right? If the coin isn't actually in your wallet, and as my big homies from By the Hood say, you wouldn't park your car on a highway, so don't leave your coins on an exchange. Whenever you purchase coins, put them into your wallet, right? Park them in your driveway. So I know I said a whole lot, but I'm gonna toss it back to you, Vince, to kind of wrangle it back in and keep us on track.
Well, one thing that I can offer is that you use the $1 million word. You said intermediary, and basically intermediary is just another term for the middleman.
Yep.
And the
Yep.
have been the middleman, and every time money moves, they take a piece of it. But when you have a peer-to-peer system, as you do in the blockchain world, you eliminate the middleman. And it's really important to understand that because, traditionally we have looked at cash as a store of value. But in today's world, cash is not a store of value because as you're holding on to it and we're affected by inflation, your money is worth less and less and less. That's why in countries like Cuba, Cubans are resorting to Bitcoin to hold their money because their money, the fiat currency, is losing value because of inflation and other things. But two, when you look at something like Bitcoin and you see that there's going to be a limitation on how many of them can be created, it's an anti-inflationary measure to be involved in Bitcoin. Bitcoin was created by someone who wanted to see an alternative to this system that involves intermediaries. So there was a certain level of intentionality when that was created. And as you mentioned, now the banking industry is catching on to that, and they're implementing platforms that use blockchain technology and so forth and so on. We had a couple of conversations leading up to this one, and I mentioned to you that Chase has created their own token.
Yep.
Citibank has created its own token, and we're moving towards this tokenization of things, which is really nothing more than digitizing assets. That's what we're doing right now. We're digitizing assets. And the bankers of the world, we're speaking of the Bank for International Settlements and the central banks that report to the Bank for International Settlements, they're in the process of completely redesigning our world financial systems. Even the SWIFT system is getting upgrades because they are realizing that they're going to lose out when people have alternatives that will enable them to do instantaneous transactions as opposed to waiting 3 or 4 days for a check to clear.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yep.
like you have to adapt, and We can talk about the World Economic Forum and the Fourth Industrial Revolution and all that other kind of stuff. But the bottom line is that technology is requiring that we look at doing things a different way. To go back to
Absolutely.
that example about Cuba, if you were to count $400 in Cuban money out, and you were to do it with US dollars, you would use fewer dollars. But if you were using Cuban dollars, you'd have a suitcase full of money. With a
Mm-hmm.
digital transaction, you don't have all that material. You just have code in a computer system that represents that value. And that's one of the reasons that this new technology is advantageous. They say in certain circles that it's even better than gold, because with gold you have the weight, So if you
Yep.
wanted to
I
pay
was just thinking that. That's where money even came from, right? Is us not having to carry all of this gold material around. That's where the banks came from, right? So the the word that I wanted to highlight, which goes into a concept. The first is the concept of supply and demand, right? That the economic principle that underlies all markets, right? And so for the audience to truly understand, and if you ever don't understand crypto, just go back to supply and demand, right? If there's the demand for it, where's the supply? Where do they meet? Now, the thing about it is, as we're talking about inflation, I know a lot of people hear inflation, they just think, oh, the price of things has increased now, and that's what inflation is. Well, inflation, yes, that's a piece of it. The price increases because of supply and demand, right? The supply is now going to decrease because the demand increases, right? And more people have money for, let's say, that case of water, right? And so now, if everybody has more money for that case of water, we got to raise the price on the case of water so that we balance out the supply and demand of things. So, for example, when it comes to printing money from the Federal Reserve, right? Printing more money throws off the balance of the supply and demand in the market. And so that's where, for example, By the Hood explained it in a perfect way. If you walk into a card shop and you have this rookie Michael Jordan card in your hand, right? And you're the only one in there with this card, right? That's valuable. Now, if five people walk in behind you with the exact same card, what does that now do to the value of this rookie Michael Jordan card that you had in your hand, right? The value decreases. So the same thing with the money. If you got this dollar in your hand, but now five people, they printed five more dollars, well, the value of the dollar that you had in your hand just dropped dramatically. So what they did during the pandemic, never seen before, over 20% of the money, 20% of the money that's in circulation right now was printed between 2020 and 2021, right? So the way that they threw all of this money into the market, throwing off the supply, right, which throws off the demand of things, which draws down the value of the dollar, and that's why scarcity baked into these cryptocurrencies is extremely important. For example, Bitcoin, we know that there will be only 21 million Bitcoin, full Bitcoin in circulation ever. As opposed to the American dollar, they can continue to print and print and print and print, and there's never, right, a shut off button for the money printer, right? So that's why it's important to purchase, Bitcoin at the right price, depending on what your investment thesis is and what you think the right price is. However, over the long term, we understand that there'll only be 21 million. So even if you get a piece of that now into the future, as we start looking at, right, the scarcity, and there will only be so many out there, if you're able to secure that for your family right now, that's like being able to invest in the oil field that the Rockefellers had back in 1910 and being able to pass that down through the generation. So no, it might not have been that much in 1910, but you flip that a few times, you adjust for inflation a couple times, you go through a few market cycles, and now you're able to see exponential gains there. So as we talked about, you don't have to buy a full Bitcoin, you're able to buy Satoshis or Sats, a small, amount of Bitcoin at a time. And so I like the Strike app, where I'm able to buy $1 of Bitcoin a day or 50 cents every single hour, however I want to do it. and just put it into my wallet, right? And so I'm using dollar cost averaging methodologies that you would typically use in the stock market with Bitcoin, which I know is number one, like you say, it's millions of cryptocurrencies in the space. But just like Rockefeller and Standard Oil, even though they changed over time and broke up, that's still the same thing. So we want to own, right, the Bitcoins and the Ethereums and even the Ripples, right? Those first movers in the space, the 1, 2, and 3, very similar to what you would do with stocks in your portfolio. You don't want to just be owning the fifth, sixth place company. No, you want to own the winners. You want to own the runner up, right? So Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, those types of names, what you really want to go for, because you know that they have utility. They're the first movers in the space, and the likelihood that they'll be around in the next 100 years is probable, more so than, right, this meme coin that you got from Elon Musk tip.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you brought up dollar cost averaging, because when you're doing dollar cost averaging, you're not really fixating on the current value, because you realize that there's volatility in the market and it's going to go up and down. But the main thing is that you acquire them with full knowledge that there's a limited supply. And at some point, they're going to have greater value than they do right now, you know. And then the
Yep.
other reality is that, and we've kind of already alluded to this, but while Bitcoin is gaining, sustaining, and growing in value, the US dollar continues to lose value because of the inflation that you referred to before. So, you know, they're making it real easy for you to acquire Bitcoin. I mean, you can go on
Absolutely.
Cash App and buy a Bitcoin right
Yep.
now, and you can do what you just mentioned, that is stacking Satoshi. So, you know, it's not really that complicated once you understand the fundamentals of how you acquire. And basically, you're going to connect your bank to an exchange where you can make a purchase of those coins, and then you can store those coins. And as you so wisely told us, don't leave them on the exchange, put them in your own wallet. So you can get a cold storage wallet. You can put your coins there. They can't be touched by anybody because they're under your complete control. In essence, what you have done is you have created your own bank, your own banking system, and that allows you to have control of your assets. I really want people to understand that when you put your money in the bank, essentially what you have done is you have loaned the bank your money. But when you loan the bank your money, it's not your money anymore. Go to the bank and say, hey, give me all my money right now. And they're going to hem and haw, and you're going to be waiting a few days before
Yep.
you get it. And then you're
Yep.
going to have to jump through a whole bunch of
Yep.
hoops. So just understand it's not your money. So if you want to control your money, you want to control your assets, then you want to have them in a cold storage wallet for safekeeping.
That's a good point. So, for example, just talking about control at a very high level, where we saw Kanye's assets were frozen, right, with J.P. Morgan because he had them in a bank, and even beyond that, talking about your cryptocurrency, taking it off of the exchange, Binance also just cooperated with the Israeli government to freeze Hamas cryptocurrency that was on their exchange, right? So if Hamas cryptocurrency was in their wallet, and if Kanye had actually been using some DeFi instead of using JP Morgan, those assets would have been protected. And even beyond that, Vince, I do want to just touch on briefly that uh, you are able to borrow against those assets, right? And so that's where these things, as they increase in value to where you're able to store it there, you're able to borrow against it. And so, for example, if you have $100,000 worth of Bitcoin, you're able to borrow against that, right? Now I'm able to take that $100,000, or just say $80,000, right, of that 100,000, and go purchase a house that now is providing me cash flow every single month. So that's how you're able to use your cryptocurrency, right, your digital assets, to move that over into the real world and start some cash flow for yourself. So just very simple, and breaking it down for the audience that yes, no, it's not just something ethereal. I can't really touch it. Nah, you could take that, the value of that Bitcoin, borrow against it, and buy real life assets. I could buy and put a down payment on a business. I can buy, a cash flowing property of some kind. So these are very real concepts that, are at the click of a button at your fingertip.
Yeah. And I think it's also worth mentioning, and that was part of what I shared with you the other day, that now JP Morgan Chase is accepting cryptocurrency. So
Right.
this is really a validation that crypto is here to stay. crypto has been the thing that has motivated the banking system to adapt to it, because if they don't, they're going to miss out on all the money that's out there. Brother Lynn, I know you've been listening, and I know you are probably concerned and curious. Is there anything that you want to ask our guest about this whole crypto situation that we're in right now?
Well, again, it's something to think about, and um, I guess the main thing that I always is in the back of my mind, as far as the system is concerned. We've been halfway, whether we know it or not, dealing in a digital society already. With the cash that we are actually circulating in our communities right now is very minimal. When you go and buy a house, all they doing is transferring numbers. When you go buy a car, all you doing is transferring numbers. They don't give you the cash or a check. So, but not being a conspiracy theorist, or not, looking at it in a negative way, but understanding this system, and for my years of life and studying on it, they're not going to take this new way of doing things sitting down. So in the back of my mind, I'm always, you see they talking about the Fed now, and doing this. So what is the system itself is going to do to counteract what's going on? That's always in the back of my mind. Now I know that I was studying a little bit about the blockchain, and how a lot of these companies were using the blockchain method for securing data, documents, and things of that nature. So in my mind, I knew that, okay, this particular way of technology is not going anywhere. They're going to be using it and implementing it in different systems of their businesses and things like that. So I said, okay, now how far this crypto itself is going to go, or this, when you talk about a world power, the money in England is so old. I mean, it's real dirt old. So my question is, are they going to sit back and let some other entity, without getting into the game, you know take over this whole money system? And I would have to say that question is, to answer that question, is no. So what are they going to do to counteract that? Is always, and it might be, as they say, you can't beat them, join them. Is that the case? It could be the
That's
case.
what it is.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
that could be the case as well. But
Yeah.
then, with power, when you're talking about power and control, what are they going to do to limit other folks' marketplace, in that particular space? What they going to do to do that? So that's what's always in the back of my mind. Like, okay, what's going to come out of this? But just like our good brother said, though, and what you said too, Vince, I think that aspect of doing, the handling money and transactions, and like my brother said, DeFi, that is a good positive thing, and I think it's going to be around to stay. And I think our listeners should also, definitely take a piece of it and be invested in it, to whatever level or percentage. It's still going to add some value to your portfolio.
Yes. And I think too, the real key is diversification.
Mm,
Not having all your eggs in one basket.
yes.
There are certain things that you can do within the system, and some of them kind of parallel what's happening in the traditional finance system. But Ross, you mentioned that you could actually borrow against the value of it, and then use that as leverage to acquire an asset that will generate income. Another thing that you can do within the cryptocurrency realm and DeFi world is staking. Could you explain staking to those who are listening and watching right now?
Absolutely. So, just as you would receive a dividend, right, for owning a stock or owning a share of, let's say, Apple company, right, every quarter, and they reward shareholders, right, for holding on to that, right, because it keeps the price of the stock stable. Just as we go back to supply and demand, if we want to keep the price of the stock, or the other word is the market cap, stable, we don't want a lot of people selling our stock. We want people to hold on to it, and we want people to buy it. And so one of the ways that companies incentivize people to purchase shares of their stock is to provide a dividend. So, for example, your traditional company provides a dividend. Your crypto, on the other hand, is going to provide a reward for what they call staking or holding on to a cryptocurrency coin for a particular period of time. So, for our listeners and viewers who have maybe invested in IPOs or initial public offerings, they know that there's a lockup period where after you buy this company, you have to hold on to it for, let's say, 3 months, 6 months, 180 days, or whatever the case is, right? We're in crypto, all right, let's say I buy Ethereum right on a particular platform and I sign up to hold on to it for 6 months to where, okay, now I know that I'm going to get this reward for staking, holding on to it for a particular period of time for over, over a certain month. So some platforms you don't necessarily have to elect, just as long as you hold it, you'll receive your reward just like you receive your dividend for holding on to that stock. And that's essentially all it is that the project or the how is it, the program, the script is run for owners or for holders. If it's in your wallet, they'll send money to your wallet or send what more cryptocurrency, right, of that particular cryptocurrency to your wallet. So it's a way to increase your position just as you would in a stock, right? With the dividend reinvestment plan, it's the same thing with a cryptocurrency to where it goes directly into your wallet and it's able to grow, right? A set it and forget it model of building wealth, essentially.
Yes. There's also a concept called hodling, which is an acronym for hold on for dear life. And I would think that hodling accompanies the idea of staking. You mentioned buying increments of Bitcoin on a very periodic basis, dollar cost averaging. And as you're doing this dollar cost averaging and you're storing a certain amount of Bitcoin, you can also leverage staking to create even greater value. So it's another way of investing in something that will allow it to grow.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. And it's so, and finance is it's a system of it's typically a both and, right? It's usually not a either or type of situation as we start talking about uh what's the best route to go and how to do it and which coin, right? So, as you mentioned earlier, diversity, of course, is your strategy to keep you from putting all your eggs in one basket, losing all of your money, so on and so forth. On the flip side, though, conservation, right, and concentrating your forces is a way to grow your wealth and build your money, right? So diversity is a strategy to not lose money. Concentration is the strategy to make money. So for our listeners who are new, yes, you want to err on the side of diversity, right? So you don't lose any money, right? And diversify with the top companies, right? And you want to balance that out with, right, not diversifying in everything across, right? As he mentioned, those million different cryptocurrencies, you want to diversify across the top three or the top five cryptocurrencies that are out there, right? Now, on the flip side, if you are a Bitcoin maximalist and you understand the project and you're all in and you are, been staking and you've really been doing your thing, by all means, right? Stack your sats and do your thing because there's so many different strategies to it. So just wanted to point out for the listeners that it's more than one way, right? To feed a cat. So you don't have to just think about, oh, I've got to do it this particular way or I'm going to get it wrong. As you just mentioned, the primary thing is the time horizon that you'll be holding on to it, right? And watching that value grow.
Yes.
Let me
And
add something here 1 second. But
okay.
go ahead, Vincent. Then let me I'll close it.
Well, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. One, what you just talked about, Ross, was the concept of hedging. So you diversify your assets so that if one goes down, you have others that are going up, and it's protection against losses. So that's a wise thing. But two, just knowing that there are so many different cryptocurrencies out there, it's really important for you to do your homework when you get involved in any project because a lot of things, and I've been a victim of this. I hate to use that word, but pump and dumps. Last year, maybe the year before, it's the relatively distant past, but I had a token that went from fractions of a cent to $95,000 that I
Mm,
had in the account. And for whatever reason, I was looking at it the wrong way. You have to know what these projects are about. And then at a certain point, you have to take your profits out so that you don't lose your investment. So one thing that and I'm not a financial advisor, this is education, information, and entertainment purposes only. But one thing that I've been aware of is, as I said before, the need to take your investment out so that you're just playing with the house money. So that approach is something that I'm looking at employing now to protect myself against losses, because I
Yep.
have been involved in a couple of projects that went by the wayside. And had I employed that strategy, then I wouldn't have experienced a loss. That's the thing that we deal with. And in a parallel way, when you look at stocks, I was watching a video last night with this brother who was suggesting that you purchase on in the stock world, you purchase index funds and ETFs as opposed to being a day trader. Because sometimes when you get involved in individual projects, they can go up and go down, and before you know it, they're gone. So
Right. Yeah.
typically people lose more than they win in those games, but everybody has this idea: if I buy this one stock, it's going to blow
Yep.
up and I'm
Yep.
going to get rich. So
Yep.
I'm just coming back to the idea that it's really important for you to do research on the projects that you get involved with and
Absolutely.
invest wisely. And sometimes it makes more sense to utilize someone else who has expertise that goes far beyond yours so that you don't experience those losses. And that's why you get a mutual fund, or you get an ETF or something like that. Because now the other thing that I'll mention is that AI is being used in this investment world as well. So they're using bots, and they're getting really good results with the bots because they're just able to make those calculations and computations so much faster than we can. So there are a lot of different ways for you, and I'll just use the term capitalize. There are a lot of different ways that you can capitalize with crypto markets and the forex markets, but it just, again, it requires you to do your homework. Antonio, you had a question.
Uh, Brother Ross, did you want to comment on that real quick before I ask? It looked like you
Uh,
had something to say.
I had some, but it escapes me right now. You got it.
Yeah, oh, okay, okay. Yeah, I again with me, when we get into these spaces and all this change and brick and money, and we wondering what's going on, in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, what's going on? Where we headed is, like I said again, I don't want to appear to be, like a conspiracy theory, but when they start talking about uh, what they've been pushing for a lot of years, new world order, globalization, and things of that nature, I always got to look into my mind's eye like, okay, where are we going with this? What's going on? We got all these new things going on, all these crypto systems going on. Where are we at? What's the end result? Because we try to look at the future and look around the corner. Try to look down the road and then around the corner to find out what's going and what kind of space we're going to be in the future like that. So my question is, my statement, rather, I want to say, and it could be a question to you, Brother Ross, and being in this company, you have to look into the whole that aspect of what I just said. Where are we going with this in the future? So is this a part of globalization? So do you think somewhere point in time where with these countries get involved in the crypto, that they're going to come with some type of centralization of these cryptos, to where everybody can interchange them and use them and come up with some kind of device that's going to mend all this situation together? And then therefore, is it connecting? Is it I guess a system that connects this globalization project that they was looking at? I'm looking at it from a conspiracy point of view.
Definitely, definitely, man. And like you say, I don't even think it's conspiracy, man. If we look at enough history, right? If we take our timeline long enough, right, we go back to ancient Rome and we see other empires and we see other um very prominent kingdoms, if you will. And what does their life cycle look like? What does their decline
Hmm.
ultimately look
Right,
like?
right, right.
And America is lining up right where the tail end of Rome looked like, right? Um, and of course, we can look at the World Economic Forum and how, right, they're saying that in the future you will own nothing and you will be happy about it, right? And as you just mentioned earlier in the show, they're taking back, right, the fiat currency and using only on-screen digital moving numbers around, doing their best to get back into play because we know that, yeah, they're not going to take this line down. They just got to figure out what the space is, how do they interject themselves, and so where does it come from? So as you kind of open the show up with Vince talking about central banking digital currencies or CBDCs, is how the Federal Reserves or the central banks, right, of these different countries around the world are going to interject themselves into this crypto push. And so as we talk about the Fed Now system, and we even talking about, right, the wealth transfer, because this is a part of the wealth transfer, is many elements and facets to the wealth transfer, but this currency changeover and switchover is a part of the wealth transfer. And so, Vince, applauding you, Antonio, applauding you for getting this message of decentralized finance out to the people, because we want to make sure that when things actually finally switch over and they really hit that switch and say, yeah, we're not taking any more cash. If you haven't been stacking your Satoshis, if you haven't been stacking your Ethereum, if you haven't been stacking your Ripple, preparing for this time that we see the writings on the wall and we know it's coming, a lot of people will be left behind. So yeah, man, it's coming. It's not a conspiracy. We see the whales or the big institutional players coming into the space, right? And we know that they're in bed with our Congress people, right? Because we see Pelosi and she's trading, and I can only imagine what type of positions Nancy Pelosi has on BlackRock or Blackstone or any of these other large conglomerate hedge funds and private equity firms that own the whole world essentially, right? So yeah, they're playing with them, and we see it coming. So it's really on us to prepare ourselves, to arm ourselves with knowledge first and foremost, and then of course go ahead and apply what we learn and teach our children the importance of these concepts and introduce them to it early, so that way, like you say, this wealth transfer, by the time the next generation comes, they'll be able to hit the ground running.
I'm so glad that you mentioned the mantra of the World Economic Forum, which is "you will own nothing and be happy." And people think that this is something that's a down the road type of thing, but when you look at what's going on right now, think of how many things that you are dealing with right now that's subscription based. Used to be you had an antenna on your house.
You bought movies.
Yeah, you got 5 channels and
Yep.
you didn't have to pay. But
Mm.
now everybody has cable. And if they don't have cable, they have something else that's going to give them access to this programming that you pay every month for. I saw an ad on Facebook last week. It was for a new car rental system. So
Yep.
with
They
this,
don't want people to own cars anymore because, right, to decrease the carbon footprint, they want to have less cars out there. Also, we see the price of homes rising, right?
mhm,
Again, inflation, they've got to price people out so that everybody can't own a home. And so we're going to be a nation of renters. Blackstone is moving into the space because those single family homes are one of the best, right, bank accounts and savings accounts that an American can have, right, for the American dream. So, yeah, man, the writing's on the wall, it's all there. And so, yeah, man, we gotta prepare.
so we're moving to a subscriber based economy, which means that you don't own it.
You don't
You know,
own it.
if you use FlexCar, you don't have to get into a long-term lease. You can tailor a monthly payment that's conducive to your budget or whatever, and then when you get tired of that card, you just get another one. You know, if you
Yep.
have a phone, if you have a phone, they're going to say, okay, well, you can make payments on the phone, no interest. So basically, you're renting the phone. You don't own it. You rent it.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know,
Until you get another one and rent that one too. Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
then the whole time they're running updates on the phone that degrades the quality of the phone that necessitates you
Right.
getting a new
Yep.
phone in
Yep.
years that they're going to rent to you. So you
Yep.
never really own the phone.
Never really own it. Nope.
You use Microsoft Word. Well, Microsoft Word they're going to encourage you to purchase a license, which means that you're going to pay every
Yep.
year or every
Yep.
month instead of just buying some software and using it forever.
Yeah,
So
man. We used to own CDs and we used to own movies, and people used to have those collections in their homes. Now everything's on your phone or your iPad, or right, or like you say, your computer, where we don't own movies anymore. So yeah, man, that's a very real point that you brought up. The sharing economy has changed the game, and this micro sharing economy, or micro ownership, if you will, shared ownership. So
Yeah.
Well, that's why I say, people, we may have to invest outside of this place and get you something tangible. It's about tangible. Take those assets you got right now and get something tangible.
yep.
Right. So purchase precious metals, because we don't want to leave
Mm-hmm.
that out of the equation,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's
American
another
silver
way
eagles,
to
Troy ounces.
go ahead.
I was about to say, yeah, like you say, purchasing precious metal, and saying just American silver eagle, silver Troy ounces that you can get from your local coin shop. That is, a great store of value. And also, as we start talking about fungibility and their ability to be traded, is there a market for them at any given time? Right. That's where a lot of those coins, going back to cryptocurrency, if there's not a market for it, if you can't trade it to somebody and somebody wants it immediately, then that's a coin that you want to stay away from, right? And you can look at volume to see how many hands it's trading. So as we start talking about doing your own research, looking at cryptocurrency, volume is one of those indicators that you want to look into. But going back to precious metal, yes, gold and silver, also palladium and platinum, but silver is pretty much the lowest hanging fruit that you can get your hands on and really get an ounce and really get your stack up. American Silver Eagle dollars, they also have built in scarcity in them, right? So every single year, the reserve is only printing a certain number of coins, right? So it's only going to have, let's say, 100 2023 American Silver Eagles. So if you have one of those, you've maintained and you've locked in that value for life. And I tell people, whether it's 1492 or whether it's 2092, if your posterity, if your grandchildren's grandchildren found a chest full of several pounds of silver, it's going to be valuable to them, right? So make sure that y'all are also buying your silver, buying your precious metals as you buying your real estate and buying your stocks and your cryptocurrency.
What real quick there, you get, but those who are paying attention to what's going on around the globe, don't leave out African resources. If those countries are starting to come back and come to their own and taking control of those resources, there's going to be money to be made there of those countries taking control of their resources.
Yeah, I can't really say too much, but what I can say is that uh I know of a startup, right? A cryptocurrency startup that is working right now with African countries to help them transition into this central bank digital currency type of wave. So, yes, this whole the opportunity for Africa and the rebuilding of Africa and what blockchain means for Africa into the future, especially for right our listeners right now who speak English, places like Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, Nigeria, Ghana, all of those places that speak English, you can pretty much go there as a Black American, African American right now and do business and really set some things up. So I know everybody like Mexico. I know everybody want to go to Europe, but as Antonio just stated, you want to check out what's going on in Rwanda right now. You want to check out what's going on in Kenya and Uganda because they're taking blockchain and Web3 to a whole new level.
All right, we've got just 40 seconds on the air on 1490 WERE, but we want to invite our listeners and viewers to stay with us. We're on Facebook, 360 Info Network, my page, and Antonio's page, Journey with Antonio. So we will continue this conversation off the air, the radio airwaves, but we're going to continue on the internet airwaves, and perhaps we can get Ras to share with us that cryptocurrency project off the radio. So, so with
Definitely.
that, we would just like to thank you for joining us. As always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make today your best day, Cleveland, and the rest of the planet. Peace.
Peace, y'all.
All right. So we're going to hang out for a few more moments on StreamYard, and we are broadcasting live to Facebook and YouTube. So we're continuing this conversation. I really wanted to mention some things that are going on at Larchmere Art, so we're going to have to do that via Facebook. And Ross, thanks you for being on the air with us today. The idea of cryptocurrency projects. and the idea of doing business with folks in Africa. I know that there is a company called Afrique Arbitrage Systems. And
Okay.
I thought maybe that might have been the project that you were talking about. In that situation, there's a Nigerian brother who started this company. Unfortunately, one of his partners decided to take advantage and hack the system and stole something like $30 million. But they caught up with that person, and so they're going through that legal process. But in the meantime, they started a new project. It's called AAS, Afrique Arbitrage System. So that's something out there for the folks who want to get involved in it. They can look into it, do their homework, their due diligence, and perhaps take advantage of that. But what did you want to mention?
Um, and so there's a gentleman by the name of Daryl Hubbard, and he's a brother, really intelligent gentleman, and he is one of the founders of the Digital Currency Monetary Authority, the DCMA, which is essentially uh, poising itself to be sort of the IMF of digital currencies, right? So the Digital Currency Monetary Authority, and there was an article that came out several months ago talking about how the DCMA had met with world leaders, in particular, as Antonio mentioned, right, some of our BRIC counterparts, in particular China. So Daryl Hubbard is the gentleman that you can look up, and he's an entrepreneur, but just a very intelligent guy all around. And so he's actually in the Web3 space, building some technology that's that's pretty impressive. And like I say, I don't want to say too much about what Daryl got going on, but I can only say, you know what I'm saying, what's public. But I will say, if you are into crypto, if you are looking to learn more about Web3 and blockchain and what are the implications with national, international government systems, Daryl Hubbard, Digital Currency Monetary Authority will be right a nice beginning for a rabbit hole to go down.
Okay.
Let me ask a question, Brother Ross. Uh, what methodology would you say, and how they? Because see, I'm looking at Africa again. Being loaded with all these resources. And we know how they did Gaddafi because he was trying to connect gold, you know, to his dollars and things
That's
like that. So they had some issues with that. So I'm sure it don't take a rocket science to understand that somewhere down the line, folks in Africa might be trying to tie its resources possibly to those digital assets or coins or things. So what methodology or how can you see that happening, or how would you just from my own personal knowledge, how would you go about doing that? What system you would, because I see we're using dollars right now because we're
right,
still using dollars to purchase
right,
those digital assets. So
right.
how would they tie those resources, the oil, the wheat, or the gold, or the whatever, cobalt, coltan, whatever, all into doing that? I seem like I could see that coming somewhere in the
And
future.
and then like you say, man, it's still a nascent space. So I really don't know. So I'm gonna give you my
Hmm.
hypothesis of how I think they will do it.
Right,
Uh,
right.
I think it'll be based upon GDP, right? What is your gross domestic product? And then it'll be something very similar to as we kind of talked about earlier, right? Borrowing against that or
Mm,
printing
okay,
currency related to that. So it'll be based
okay.
upon, right? What are you doing commerce wise in the world? Because we know Africa has been undervalued and being the breadbasket for the world, as Dr. John Henrik Clark said, and hasn't received anything on the back end. So I think that the blockchain and that peer to peer will allow them to right remove the middleman, remove any colonial middleman, and be able to get that money
Okay,
directly.
okay, okay.
Yeah. And two, you have the emergence of the BRICS right now. And they're also talking about having an alternative world reserve trading currency. Antonio, when you were talking about centralization, uh, the Bank for International Settlements, they want to have one currency for the entire world. They want to have the CBDC for the entire world.
Yep.
Right, right.
You know, but The issue with that is that there are countries that want to retain their sovereignty, and the circumstances in some countries differ from the circumstances in other countries. The other thing is that when you look at the BRICS as an alliance, you're seeing that they're having a much greater share of the world GDP, and the G7, they're losing ground in that whole idea. So the G7 is losing its percentage of the GDP. They're also losing their percentage of the world population. So there are more people living in these BRICS countries than these so-called developed countries. So there's a paradigm shift going on in the world economic systems, and the BRICS countries are talking about backing the currencies with commodities. And this is in direct
Right.
opposition to the fiat system that we have now with the Fed, where basically all they do is just create more money. They just keep kicking the can down the road, you
Mhm.
know. And at a certain point, the currency that you're dealing with is going to be completely lost in terms of value. It won't be worth anything anymore. In 1913, when the Fed was created, a dollar was worth a dollar. Well, now
Right.
a dollar is only worth 2 or 3 cents.
Yep.
And as they
Yep.
continue to expand this money supply, and then you have inflation that is a result of greed from companies, because, these companies now, they don't have to raise their prices as much as they are, but they're greedy and they know that they're going to get paid, so they do it anyway. They're not
And
concerned
that's yep.
about us as
That
consumers. Go ahead.
that's another piece, man, of like you say, I going back to the inflation and going back to them printing money and the value of the money dropping, right? Yeah, it goes to those companies because right when American people get some money, right, and get a bailout, now they start calling that welfare, and you are, using the system. When the American corporations get a bailout, right, and they're printing all of this money to prop up the stock market and prop up these companies, now it's good for the economy, and now this is what's necessary. But now we're starting to experience and see some of those headwinds of no, we've got to decrease employment by 1 million people, right? We got to make sure that they don't have their jobs. We got to raise interest rates, right? So the cost to buy and sell money has now increased. So a lot of that is reflected in the stock market and reflected in these companies out here. So it doesn't necessarily, right, come to the individual. And as you just mentioned, that corporate greed and just the system of corporatism that we have in the United States, not even necessarily a system of capitalism anymore, right? Because we know that our corporations are electing our public officials, and whoever has the biggest purse is able to get into the office. So it's a lot going on,
Okay.
man, and the implications.
I think we ought to be just to put out there so people can be mindful and putting in the back of their mind, like we talked about, the system and the powers that be not lying down while this jockeying is taking place. So what you see, and I pose this question to both of you brothers, you think we're going to see what we are starting to see now, a lot of uprisings and confusion, because historically, when somebody come in and try to move America out or change this financial dynamics out, there's usually some problems and some conflicts. There's some stuff that go down to take that system out, that person out, that country out, and things like that. So I'm just saying this to say, this jockeying could fester, more of these little conflicts and things that we see, because sometimes we look at this stuff as face value, or why they mad at this person, why they want, but there could be an underlying thing going on, some jockeying going on that we may not be, as the public, mindful of what's going on, because again, they're not going to lie down with this. So right now, I would definitely say that, because of the Ukraine stuff and Russia stuff, America, you see how many times that supposedly Putin had his life threatened and things of that nature. They indirectly trying to take, because they're trying to squash that whole China
Yep.
Russia alliance situation, so we can see those things taking place.
Yep. And man, and it's like to your point and question of will we see more unrest and just more conflict? I think we will, man, because the situation, of course, in Russia and Ukraine. Then, of course, right, what just popped off this past week with Israel and Palestine. Then we look over at China and what's going on with Taiwan and how they might go in there and take the Taiwan Semiconductor Company. But inside of China, right, they are collapsing and rotting from the inside out with a lot of
Is
their
that
big.
right?
Yeah, Evergrande
Mhm.
is a company. EBERGRANDE has defaulted on their loans for quite some time, and so China is experiencing a meltdown. Europe, of course, is experiencing a meltdown even more so. Like you say, when it comes to home prices, they're experiencing even greater rate than we are, in terms of not being able to be homeowners, right? Millennials being upset and Gen Z just being upset. So, man, it's a lot of signs pointing to evolution, right? I ain't gonna put the R in front of it. I'm just gonna say it's a lot of signs pointing to evolution right
Okay.
now.
All right.
So
Mhm.
with technology, just the sentiment, right? And then of course we know, thinking about when hip hop was developed, right? Where in the 80s and the late 70s, when the conditions were crazy and we had a politician in office who was also a movie star, and you know what I mean, and just the Republican ethic out there. So it's a lot going on right now, man. And I often think about, when I'm reading the headlines and I think about the doom and gloom, and I think about my grandfather who was born in 1930. And so he was 30 years old in 1960, right? And I can only imagine, as a 30-year-old man in 1960, and you see 63, you see 64, 65, you see 68, and all of these different things that happen in between that time. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure it looked like the world was ending. But, I'm blessed and thankful that he was able to stay focused on his family, was able to buy a house that is still in my family. You know what I mean? So even with all these things going on in the world right now, it's nothing new under the sun, right? And it's important to stay focused and work your plan regardless of what's going on around you.
That's a great point, Ross, because the bottom line is life goes on, and we're very resilient. We adapt to circumstances. Just think about what we went through with the transatlantic enslavement process. We
Absolutely.
went through all that. We got here to America, and then we were still able, despite all of the obstacles that we faced, we were still able to make significant contributions to the success of this country, not just based on our labor, but also based on our ingenuity. When you think
Yep.
about all the things that we invented in this society, the things that we might take for granted. You get in your car, you use GPS to get somewhere. Thank the
Real.
system that created that.
Yep.
You get in your lap.
We have on our face. Like,
Yeah. I mean, you get on your laptop, you get on the internet. Well, thank a brother, thank a sister, because when
yep.
you look at NASA and the success that they have
Yep.
experienced, why hidden figures. There's the proof. So it's
Absolutely.
not that we were damaged goods and we weren't able to be productive. We've always found a way, just like your grandfather did. He was able to navigate all these things, because when you look at what's going on in our economy right now, it kind of mirrors what happened in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And coincidentally, that was the time when they unhooked the dollar from
Yep.
its relationship to gold, and it became the fiat currency that it is right now.
Yep.
That's so problematic. So we'll find another way. But I wanted to mention, to Brother Antonio's point about this whole idea of creating unstable countries.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the Dominican Republic. Same island. People go to Dominican Republic for vacation and for pleasure. But then on that same island, you have this narrative of all this poverty and all this devastation and so forth and so on. Well, the reason that they create the instability in Haiti is because they want to exploit the resources.
Mm-hmm.
So if you keep a certain level of instability within the population, that enables you to control them,
Yep.
because it's all about control.
Absolutely.
If you look at the continent of Africa, traditionally that's what they've done. They've created a certain level of instability amongst the populations because they want to control your perception of that country. So, oh no, I can't go to that country because it's not stable. You don't want to do business with that country because it's not stable. But at the same time, they're exploiting that country. I mean,
Man, let
go
me
ahead.
just okay. So you just brought up that excellent point, man. And it brings to mind the book, right? The Economic Hitman, the Tales of the Economic
Uh,
Hitman. I forgot the actual
Conf-
book.
Confessions of the Economic Hitman.
Thank you very
Mhm.
much. And so how the and even thinking about right COINTELPRO, how they were able to destabilize and create these internal conflicts, and we go to the Hutus and Tutsis. Now in our modern context, right, we see on the internet the infighting almost out of nowhere between Black Americans, right? The Caribbean black people, and then of course Black people on the continent, and all of this discord that's coming in to try to right get us to infight with each other, to where in this time of history, you know, it's more reason for us to band together and to come together, and the opportunities for us to come together are greater than ever before, right? Shout out to National Security Council Memorandum 46, you know what I mean, to keep the Black people from the continent of Africa separate from the Black people in America, because we don't want any Black messiahs to come around that could potentially, right, destabilize the American people. And so, as you just mentioned, it's important for us to recognize the tools that have been used against us in the past, so we can identify when they're being used on us right now. So with all of that being said, man, I just wanted to point out that yeah, the Black brothers and sisters that's here on the continent, when I went to Ghana, it was all love. When I went to Nigeria, it was all love, right? So for a lot of people who get those reports that the Africans on the continent, they don't like you and they feel this way about us. Nah, that's totally not true. And everybody already knows Black Americans, we some of the most welcoming people in the world, where we take anybody and everybody into our situation. So
Right.
yeah, man, it's the opportunities for us to do business, going back to your point, brother Antonio, with Africa, and to, you know, put our resources with those brothers and sisters over there. Yeah, it's that time.
Yeah.
We got to make one point when you that listeners need to know that, see, again, there's a reason for all of that, the destabilization of Africa and all those southern equator countries, you know, the northern, that's why they had this alliance. They came together up there. They say they must control the southern equator because it's valuable to their sustainability. Okay, but just so it's always that we always got to look like that, look at to the situations like that, you know, because they dictating the narrative on how we look at people and countries and things like that. There's a reason other than the Haitians kicking the French behind, you know,
Mhm.
back in the day. But there's another reason too, is about they the second largest owners of the resource, uranium.
Mhm.
Uranium, if I'm saying it correctly, you know, from this mineral that comes from a meteor that hit that particular area there. Haiti and South Africa is the two biggest resources of this. They just saying a small quantity of it costs multi millions of dollars of it. That this particular element, you know, can sustain heat, you know, more than any other thing that we have on the planet that they can use it for. So they purposely, in a lot of these countries, you know, destabilize them, you know, having warring against them, putting their puppets in place to, you know, to keep the best interests of these European countries and America like that, to keep the confusion on so they can keep padding their pockets. We have to really bring that home, and we have to be looking at things that are going on the planet, and it's been this particular kind of way for a long time. Looking down our nose at these countries and not knowing who is the man behind us. And I think when we talked about that book, Brother Ross, about the Confessions of an Economic Hitman,
Yep.
he sit there and tell you how they go around and destabilize these countries. And if one of these leaders had the best interest of the country in mind and didn't want to play ball with America, they take him out. They take him out. They take him out. And then here we go, black folks, because we're not that versed in history or in what's going on outside of the box, outside of this country, as far as world is concerned. We all, what's wrong with those people? Why they
Mhm.
can't get their stuff together?
They can't get it together. Yep.
All this, it's a trip, man.
Well, you can look at that happening on both sides of the globe. You know, here in America, Dr. King, you know, when Dr. King started talking about boycotts and affecting their pockets, they had to take him out.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
when Malcolm X was talking about human rights versus civil rights, they had to take him out. Then you
Mm-hmm.
go to the continent of Africa. You look at Nkrumah. You look at Patrice Lumumba. You look at Muammar Gaddafi. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when
Second
you had
tour.
people in place that were threatening the status quo and their ability to control resources and maximize their profits, they had to
Mm-hmm.
leave. And then to the point that you made, Russ, about how they basically have turned different sets of African people against each other. It's just in direct alignment with the concept of divide and conquer. So they keep
Mm-hmm.
us arguing amongst ourselves. And while we're arguing, we're not joining our arms together and our hands together to say, how can we move ourselves forward? We're busy fighting each other over well, you Baptist and I'm AME, or you Republican and I'm Democrat. You have all these different polarities. I'm conservative, you liberal, all these different things that keep us in the struggle, in the conflict of our philosophy. When if we got behind something as simple as being centered amongst our identity, Brother Lynn, we talk about African centered education. We talk about Afrocentricity. We talk about Nguzo Saba. We talk about principles that have been a part of who we are for as long as we have existed. And
Mm-hmm.
when we embrace who we are and we embrace our identity and the cultural traditions that have kept us, have enabled us to maintain an identity that serves us as a people, then we're able to succeed. But as long as we allow someone else to manipulate our concept of ourselves, things as simple as a name. Brother, your name is Ras Asan. And I know that Ras and Asan has a meaning that is specific to you and it empowers you to do what you do. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So many of us, we either made up a name or we took up a name that was equated to a culture or a language or something that ain't got nothing to do with us.
Mm-hmm.
But when we connect with the power that's as simple as something in our name, and it doesn't have to be complicated.
Right.
I was born on a Thursday. My name is Yao. Because I am a Yao, there are certain things that are part of my character.
Yep.
So if somebody needs something that a Yao provides, all they got to do is say, hey, Yao. Yao shows up. Yao do what Yao do.
Right.
And
Yep.
it's not that complicated, but even beyond that, you've got day names, but then you've got the practice of observing that child for characteristics that may have been related to one of their
Mm.
ancestors. So when
Right.
they hear the name of that ancestor, then they're bringing the spirit of that ancestor into the world. And more often than not, that was a person who was conscious and aware of their purpose and living in that purpose. So now
Mm.
you've just empowered somebody to live within a purpose that serves
Continue.
society because
Man.
it's aligned
Man.
with the idea of Ubuntu.
Yep.
We all
Yep.
exist for the
Yep.
benefit of others. These are just cultural things that are part of who
Exactly.
we are.
It's
And
Yep.
when
Yep.
we
empowering.
wake up to them and we put them in
Exactly.
practice, then we can experience success as people on this planet.
Man, and I'll close it with this because I got to run to my next appointment. I definitely appreciate the conversation. Going back to broke capital and the idea, especially for Black people, for original people, that capital is so much more than money, right? And as you just talked about, cultural capital is one of those things that you can have that empowers you, as Brother Antonio just said, is that that's what your culture is supposed to do. Intellectual capital, relationship capital. You also have financial capital, right? You have your spiritual capital. All of these different types of capital that you'll have and be able to
Values.
grab from your community, right? From your environment, from your village that's around you. And as you just mentioned, that's how we measured wealth originally, right? We didn't just measure it in finance. We measured it. How far can you go back? How many ancestors do you know? Right? How tapped in are you with your family? If your family's not doing well, then I don't care what your net worth is. Then y'all ain't doing well. That's just what it is, right? So I'm really glad, and of course, man, I'm excited. I got to come back on the show to continue the conversation and get into some of these more cultural pieces, because like I say, as a sociologist, it's right up my alley.
Yeah, and we totally washed over the fact that you're an herbalist as well. You
Yeah,
know,
all that.
that's a whole nother rabbit
Yep.
hole, but it's a beneficial rabbit hole because it can improve the quality of our health. And of course, you know, our health is our wealth, aside from having Satoshi stacked or gold stacked or
Yep.
whatever.
Yep.
So, Ross, I really want to sincerely thank you. You know, I knew when I met you, I knew when I met you, you were going to blow some minds, and you have definitely done that. So
I
we're
appreciate
going to
it.
go ahead and recruit you as a subject matter expert. And I know we talked about you being an SME, and you kind of back from that, but you do know what you know, and what you know is beneficial to others to know. So we want to lean on you so that you can give our folks some tools and steer them towards a spirit of entrepreneurism to break them out of the chains of wage slavery and empower them to create wealth and resources that they can use to pass down to their generations. We're going to keep this going. Thank you so much for joining us, Brad.
Thank you, both of y'all. I'm looking forward to it. It was a pleasure meeting you, Antonio.
Yes, sir,
Pleasure
my
seeing
brother.
you again, Vince. Yeah, man, this was amazing. And yeah, man, I'm looking forward to doing it again. Wonderful show, y'all.
All right. Thank
Yes.
you, brother.
Thank
Peace and
y'all.
blessings.
All
Peace.
right now, peace be.
All right.
Okay, boss.
All
I
right.
gotta
Peace.
take my car to the shop. Okay. All right.
Okay.
All right, later.
All right.